Hey guys, in a world where representation and authentic storytelling are increasingly vital, understanding our diverse and often hidden history is a powerful step toward greater inclusivity and empathy. Let me introduce Lee Wen, a man whose passion and dedication are truly reshaping our understanding of history. Lee is an author and historian who tirelessly advocates for queer youth. Lee's made it his life's mission to ensure that everyone, especially the younger generation, can see themselves represented in the annals of history. Through his books, his research, and his compelling storytelling, he's rewriting the narrative, bringing to light the stories of queer individuals that have long been kept in the shadows. So get ready for an amazing, enlightening, inspired, and challenging journey as we work with, talk with, and live the life of Lee Wen. Here we go. Lee, I am like so happy that you are here.
Thanks, Michael. You made me blush. That was a great intro. Thank you.
Oh, I love blushing. That's good.
The annals of history. That was so funny. When you said the annals of history, I thought, oh, yes, this is why I hated history as a kid. It was so boring.
It
It was
was.
all like names and dates to memorize. And I was just like, no, stop. I don't want to memorize. So, yeah, it's kind of hysterical that I grew up to be someone that wrote a book about history.
Yeah, I failed my history classes in college. I'm pretty sure I retook American history or whatever history it was like 3 times. So, yeah.
Well, and probably because that history had no representation of anyone like you, right? Like it was like that's the problem with how history is taught. Like they basically only tell us the stories of rich, white, straight, cis men from Europe
Yeah.
who are able-bodied. It's like it doesn't include history is this calculated stories that are cherry-picked from the actual what happened
Right.
to sort of empower the people that have power. And it's not about telling our stories. It's not our story.
Mhm.
It's his story, right? Like even break the word down,
That
his
is good.
story. Yeah, so it's just a total crock. And like the way we teach history is completely this false facade. And so it's very exciting because when you break that facade, when you recognize that wow, history is not really what happened, it's just the official story to
Mhm.
support the power structures, suddenly history like opens up with like rainbows and flowers and like there's all this amazing stories that can really empower us. So that's it's like history should be empowering and exciting and relatable to everybody, and I think that that's like the secret sauce.
I think that you are 1000% like right. Like, what was the turning point in your life when like you realized that your experience and mission needed to be shared with the world? When did that happen?
So actually it was crazy. So I'm gay and I didn't come out until I was 25. So I spent from age 11 to 25 like actively hiding who I was every single day, like
Mhm.
really closeted. And it felt very unsafe. I thought I would lose my family and everything would fall apart. So and I dated girls, and during the time that I dated girls, I just kept thinking, like I judged that it was the right thing to do because it's what everyone wanted me to do, it's what society wanted me to
Mhm.
do, but I didn't feel what I knew I was supposed to feel. I mean, I heard the love songs on the radio like everyone else, and I knew I didn't feel what I was supposed to feel. So fast forward, I come out at 25. About 10 years later, I'm kind of like still working through being a teenager again, but in a more authentic way in my, in my 20s and I in early 30s. And I went to a talk and this guy was talking about the letters that Abraham Lincoln wrote Joshua Fry Speed that convinced him that Abraham was in love with Joshua. And I was like, what? That can't possibly be true. I mean, Abraham Lincoln's on the $5 bill. He's on Mount Rushmore. He's on the
Uh-huh.
penny. Like I've never heard any of this, but I couldn't get it out of my mind. So I went to the library and I got out a book. And again, history I thought was super boring. So like here I have this book called Joshua Fry Speed, Lincoln's Most Intimate Friend. And I'm like, oh, I don't even really want to read this, but okay, I'm curious. So I flipped to the back. The back half of the book is all the letters, the primary reproductions, the primary source materials, the letters that Abraham wrote Joshua over a 10-year period, I think it is.
Mhm.
And so again, history boring. So I just flip randomly to a page and I start reading, and it, Joshua had been married, had just gotten married to this woman named Fanny, and Abraham's writing him, and it's 8 months later. And my eye catches on this line. Abraham says something like, "Now let me get to the part of the point of writing this letter. Are you now, in feeling as well as judgment, glad that you're married as you are?" And I was like, what? That, I had goosebumps. I was like, that is
Uh-huh.
exactly how I felt when I dated girls. And he says, Lincoln goes on to say, from anybody but me, this would be an impudent question, not to be tolerated, but I know you'll tolerate it from me. And he ends the letter with saying something like, please tell me quickly, I feel very impatient to know. So we don't have the answer
Okay.
because Mary burned all of Joshua's letters to Abraham. Another story. But we do know it was only less than 4 weeks later that Abraham married Mary Todd.
Okay.
And I was like, what? So that was the beginning. That was the beginning of my being like, well, maybe Abraham Lincoln really was in love with Joshua Fry Speed. And then I started to do more and more research, and I became totally convinced and really excited because I was like, if Abraham Lincoln was in love with another guy, and I think that there is definitely evidence to support that. I mean, we go all weird in history when we talk about like a man loving another man. We're like, well, show me the DNA proof. It's
Mm-hmm.
like, it's not about that. I mean, we as a culture, we're very prurient and we're always about like, ooh, did they have sex? It's like, that's not even interesting. And there's no way for us to know. But we do have letters, and we do have other primary source materials. And I think that those can really help us unlock the sort of the secrets of how people actually felt and the lives they lived. And so as I became more and more excited about like discovering all this information about Lincoln and Speed, and there's a lot of evidence, it just kind of was like, I wanted to write a book about it. So I wrote a novel about a kid today, kind of like a bit of me as a teen,
Mm-hmm.
who lives in a very homophobic small town called Lincolnville, Oregon. His parents owned the Lincoln Slept Here bed and breakfast, and he discovers the same letter. He's inadvertently dating a girl who's his best friend because he hasn't told anyone that he's gay, and he stumbles upon this exact same letter I did. And has the same goosebump moment and decides he's going to out Abraham Lincoln to change the world. He does on a blog for school, and it goes viral, and it just triggers an enormous conservative backlash and media firestorm. And so
Yeah, I
he has
can't
to kind of,
imagine that would happen.
oh no, I literally had people read it back a couple of years ago before this current wave of anti-queer legislation, and they were like, "It's a little extreme, don't you think?" And I'm like, "Nope, I don't think."
So,
And as I was writing the novel, there was just so much evidence that came up, and I was like, maybe I need to do a second book. Maybe I need to do a book that's really the nonfiction stories. And when I wrote that book, I was like, I didn't want it to just be about Abraham and Joshua. Again, I wanted it to be interesting and empowering. So I ended up writing a book that is called No Way They Were Gay, which is about men who loved men and women who loved women and people who lived outside the gender binary in history. So 2 books from one aha moment.
that is awesome. So now, one of the things I want to focus on everything you're saying here. First of all, yeah, if we talk to anyone in America, they're gonna go, Abraham Lincoln chops wood, was president. No way he was gay. You talk about Mahatma Gandhi. You talk about other
Mm.
people in history also, and I think it's important for the youth, right, the kids who are coming up that are queer, to go like, really, somebody else is like me. What Talk about that for a second. Like, why is it important?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you know, it's almost like if you reversed it, right? Like if how is it possible that everybody important in history was not gay? How is it possible that everybody important in history was straight? Like it doesn't seem possible, right?
Hmm.
Like so and when you don't see a reflection of yourself in history, you kind of feel like you're brand new. Like even in the queer community, we do this weird thing where we're like, at 1969 Stonewall, where Pride began, queer people did not begin in 1969. There are thousands of years of records of men who love men, women who love women, people who love without regard to gender, people who lived outside the gender binary, all around the world. And so, like when we find out these stories, okay, so here's one, Sappho, right? Sappho was this famous poet back like over 2,000 years ago. And actually we get the word lesbian because Sappho lived on an island called Lesbos. And Sappho was pretty famous for loving other women. And she wrote about that, she talked about that in her poems. Poets didn't write their poetry down back then. They sort of performed it like Madonna, right? Like a beat, like beat poetry, right? They accompanied themselves on an instrument. And so anyway, Sappho was super famous for being the most incredible poet alive. And prior to her, all the famous poets were men. And they pretty much, their poetry was about expressions of toxic masculinity. It was sort of like, wow, look at that army, you know, not a direct quote. Look at this ships, look at this, look at, you know, look at that battle about to happen. Like that's the most powerful thing on the face of the earth. And Sappho wrote this one poem where she talks about the most beautiful thing on the face of the dark earth is not a fleet of warships or cavalry, you know, riding off to battle. It was the face of the woman she loved, Anactoria, flashing radiant, because she would rather see that. And something about that idea captured the imagination of people and captured the hearts of people because they agreed, right? Like if you really think about it, like what's the most powerful thing in the world? We think it's love in our culture, and we think it because of Sappho. So 800 years ago in France, when they were writing Sleeping Beauty, what broke the kiss of what broke the evil spell? It was the kiss of true love, right? So that actually comes to us. That's the legacy of Sappho loving this woman, Anactoria. Sappho loved a bunch of other women too in her lifetime, but it's very exciting when we recognize that like something we all believe in. All those Disney movies ends with a kiss of true love, and it all is because Sappho was in love with another woman. But the way history is told, it's sort of like we're cut off from our legacy of queer people making our world a better place, and all we know is that, oh well, of course love is the most powerful thing in the universe. But why do we know it?
How do you think like our history, we'll talk about US history, the world history would be different had we come out and said, you know, this person was gay, this person was lesbian, trans, whatever? How do you think things would have been different now?
I mean, it was so dangerous for people to be open at many different times. I don't know what would have happened. I mean, it's you know, Harvey Milk had a great quote where he was saying, you know, if everybody came out, homophobia would not cease to exist because everybody would know and love and care about somebody queer. And I think there's a lot of merit to that to that notion. When I was researching Gandhi, and I didn't know that Gandhi was in love with this guy, Herman Kallenbach, but I read about it in the New York Times because the book, so Joseph Lelyveld is a book, he writes these beautiful, long biographies for adults. He did one on Gandhi, and it was called Great Soul, and it was banned in one of the states of India because there were 2 pages that talked about Gandhi's relationship with Herman Kallenbach, this German Jewish architect, and referred to them as soulmates. Now, that wasn't something that Lelyveld made up. There's actually primary source evidence that they referred to each other as soulmates. And when I was reading those over 200 letters between Gandhi and Herman Kallenbach, I kind of had this epiphany, which was very exciting because previous to this, I just thought like, wow, what an interesting footnote to history, right? We had all these famous people and, you know, oh, by the way, they were queer. Right. And I just kept saying, no way, they were gay, which is how I got the title of the book. But reading the letters between Gandhi and Herman, like there was this moment because, I mean, Gandhi was the one that said, it doesn't matter if you pray facing left and I pray facing right, we're all sort of praying to the same power. Like that was a huge breakthrough in humanity. And I think that if we look at his life and we think about the fact that he was basically married as a child to Kasturba, they ended up having 4 children. But when you look at there's a love contract between Gandhi and Herman that's incredibly beautiful, where they pledge love and more love between them, such love as they hope the world has never seen. Like the fact that Gandhi was in love with this other man who was Jewish could not have, it had to have had an impact on Gandhi's evolution of his own belief. And in fact, what we all believe, right? Like that changed our world. So I started to think maybe it's not a footnote to history. Maybe the reason that these people made such an impact on history is because they were queer. And because they were queer, they had maybe an extra empathy or an extra an extra perspective that let them. Eleanor Roosevelt was in love with this woman, Lorena Hickok. Yeah, she was married to the president, but he had his own relationship, and she ended up having hers with this woman, Lorena Hickok. And like the fact that Eleanor loved Lorena probably had something to do with the fact that after FDR died, Eleanor became this ambassador to the United Nations and led the charge for the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. You know, Abraham Lincoln, he wasn't a perfect person, but like knowing that he was in love with Joshua Fry Speed, maybe there's some sense of otherness there that plays into the fact that he was the person that, you know, liberated the enslaved people in the US. Like there's a lot of history that starts to open up and make a lot more sense.
It does.
When we actually put aside the hundreds of years of historians that have outright lied, changed pronouns, you know, hidden it from us, and we actually start to like engage with the primary sources themselves. And that's why in all my books, I try to like make it really clear what's a primary source and what's me. Like all the primary sources are in bold. There's like a zillion endnotes, but because I want us to surface the stories from history and hear these people in their own words. And it's not just this like dusty history. Can I tell you one more?
Please do.
Okay.
I've got questions, but I love what you're saying, so keep going.
The biggest like hero of mine in doing all this research became Bayard Rustin. He was a openly gay Black man who was a leader in the civil rights movement. He was actually the guy that taught Martin Luther King Jr. about nonviolent protest. He was the guy that organized the famous March on Washington, where Dr. King gave his I Have a Dream speech. And in fact, there's an amazing photo that I have in the book of Bayard standing like two people behind Dr. King during that incredible moment in our history. So Bayard was interviewed later in his life in 1986, and he was asked, there are two quotes from Bayard I'm going to read because he was amazing. So he was asked if he had any advice for other Black gay activists. And he said, I think the most important thing is that they should try to build coalitions of people for the elimination of all injustice. Because if we want to do away with the injustice to gays, it will not be done because we get rid of the injustice to gays. It will be done because we are forwarding the effort for the elimination of injustice to all. And we will win the rights for gays or Blacks or Hispanics or women within the context of whether we are fighting for all.
Exactly.
And I believe that so strongly. I mean, I feel like as a gay man, my journey has been like learning that I need to be an ally to all the other letters in the fabulous alphabet soup of our queer community, LGBTQIA2+, and to Black people and other people of color and Indigenous people and to women and to disabled people. Like that is the gig. Like we need to be allies to each other and push for equality and justice for all of us, because that's how we will actually transform our society and our culture. And he said something else that was amazing. I did a different interview also, and actually it was a speech in 1986 that I think speaks unbelievably to where we are right now today in this sort of like post-Trump America. The job of the gay community is not to deal with extremists who would castrate us or put us on an island and drop an H-bomb on us. The fact of the matter is there's a small percentage of people in America who understand the true nature of the homosexual community. There's another small percentage who will never understand us. Our job is not to get those people who dislike us to love us. Nor was our aim in the civil rights movement to get prejudiced white people to love us. Our aim was to try to create the kind of America, legislatively, morally, and psychologically, such that even though some whites continued to hate us, they could not openly manifest that hate. That's our job today, to control the extent to which people can publicly manifest anti-gay sentiment. And I think that says so much about the moment we're in right now, especially in America. Like people feel emboldened to publicly express their hate, their racism, their xenophobia, and we need to get back to the kind of America where they do not feel like they can express it.
Yeah, exactly. I have a question for you though about that, because all these people who are out now are saying we're going to start banning books again, or continue banning books, but now we can do it openly. And I would guess that probably your books might get targeted because of that, and other books have been targeted. As an author, I mean, just tell me what you feel about that. How's it going? What's up?
Well, everybody's like, congratulations, your book has been banned. It actually sucks unless you're in the top 10 most banned books and you get on the big lists from the American Library Association and you get a big boost. Most of the books that are being banned or censored or just quietly, it's called self-censorship, but the librarians become afraid of buying the books. Like the teachers don't want to bring the books into the classroom because they're worried about their jobs. Like this sort of quiet impact of the chilling impact of this kind of book banning and censorship. It's very hard to quantify, right? But it definitely hurts authors like me. No Way They Were Gay has been banned in 2 states and has been called obscene online. And it's written for ages 11 and up. There's nothing obscene in the book. I think what's obscene is this idea that people want to prevent other people's children from having access to information. And it's like all these kids have phones, right? They all have access to the internet. It's not like a surprise to them that queer people exist. But by taking books away, books are empathy machines. And by taking away the books, it prevents understanding, right? It prevents us actually getting to learn, and it's fiction and nonfiction. And this is not just about the queer community. Like Bayard said, like this is a coalition of people under attack, right? Like Black history is being banned in Florida along with queer history. Like this is a larger issue. And actually, I was really racking my brains what to do because the Florida thing was so upsetting that they had a law where we were like, you can't talk about queer people even existing from kindergarten through 4th grade. And I was like, well, that's horrible because, okay, so this is a mistake that everybody makes. And actually, the word homosexual does not help the queer community because it makes straight people focus on the word sex in the middle of that. And they think about, oh, if you're a homosexual, then that sex is the only thing that defines you. And the fact that, well, I don't want to think about how you have sex. I mean, I don't want to think how my parents have sex, right? Like it's like sex we're weird about in our culture. So like but the love that holds me and my husband and our adult daughter together as a family is the same love that holds everybody else's family together. So if the word was homolovual, if we were talking about homolovual rights and homolovual history, I think we'd be having very different conversations. And that would really empower us to focus in a different way, to think about what we share in common. And so what I ended up doing as a response to, with the point of that being that, like, you can talk to kids about, a man falling in love with another man, or a person who lives outside the gender binary in a very kid appropriate way. You're not talking to kids about sex. And that's sort of this conservative Republican, political narrative that, oh, they want to sexualize our children. No, we just want to talk about existing and the fact that we are not brand new. Like everybody thinks like, oh, in my grandparents' time, there weren't queer people, but there were. They just weren't as open about it. So I ended up, when they expanded that law in Florida to 12th grade, now saying you can't talk about queer people existing until they graduate high school. I was like, that is insane. So I actually started a podcast, and every Thursday in June, I'm going to release the audiobook as chapters, as episodes of Queer as a $5 Bill, as kind of a way around all the book banning and just make it free and available to everyone. All those teens that want to read it, they'll be able to read it for free and listen to it for free. And I'm really excited about that because we have to do something. And I want the information to get out there because I know the impact it would have had on me. When I was 13 years old, if I'd found out that Abraham Lincoln was in love with another guy, I don't think I would have been in the closet until 2025. I think it really would have changed my life.
Well, I can say at least you're in a either good or bad company, since DeSantis's book got banned also. So,
I mean, that's the thing. Once you start banning books, it's like it's all about who has control, who has power. Banning books is a terrible path to go down as a culture.
Yeah, I mean, what is it? Fahrenheit 459? Yeah, there we are, burning them, letting them,
451, I think. Yeah. And
whatever
actually
it
the
is. Yeah.
Nazi, the famous image of the Nazis burning books in the opera place. What most people don't know is that most of those books were had been raided from a library about queer people in Berlin, and so over 10,000 of those volumes that were burned were about our queer history.
Yeah. I got one more question for you before we do something else. I want to know if you could literally go back in time, or even right now, manifest one of your heroes. Who would it be? Who would you want to go back in time and talk to about being queer and just have a discussion with them?
I think it has to be Bayard. I just was so amazed that everything he said in the 80s sounds like he said it yesterday.
Hmm.
And incredibly brave too. So there was this great story. So when Obama was president, he awarded Bayard the Presidential Medal of Freedom. Bayard had passed away, so his partner at the time, Walter, accepted it. But Obama told this story, and I have to share it because it's just so good.
Please do.
Early in the morning on the day of March, early in the morning of the day of the March on Washington, the National Mall was far from full, and some in the press were beginning to wonder if the event would be a failure. But the march's chief organizer, Bayard Rustin, didn't panic. As the story goes, he looked down at a piece of paper, looked back up, and reassured reporters that everything was right on schedule. The only thing those reporters didn't know was that the paper he was holding was blank. Isn't that crazy?
That is fabulous.
He didn't know how it was going to work out, but Bayard had an unshakable optimism, nerves of steel, and most importantly, a faith that if the cause is just and people are organized, nothing can stand in our way. So for decades, this great leader, often at Dr. King's side, was denied his rightful place in history because he was openly gay. No medal can change that, but today we honor Bayard Rustin's memory by taking our place in his march towards true equality, no matter who we are or who we love.
Do you know, I just listening to that, and the paper was gay, but it was I mean, not gay, it was blank. Wasn't
Blank.
It's enough for me to go, you know what? It's your force of your will, your force of your emotions and everything else. And I'm like, I'm just gonna start carrying around a piece of blank paper, and anytime I need to talk to someone, it's like, let me read this to you.
We're right on time.
Yeah. Right on. I love that. And I am absolutely going to do that. I want people to know more about you. We're going to play a little game here I do with everybody called This or That. I'm going to give you two choices. You can choose one or the other, but you can't choose neither or both. And if you want to make some explanations, I suppose you could do that too if you really want to. So let's talk about it. Okay. Young adult or middle grade?
Young adult.
I like young adult, by the way. It's like, I think, one of the best genres in the world. And Caden, the producer for the show, is also writing a YA book, and I cannot wait to. I was going to say read. I can't read. I can't wait to listen to it, but it's going to be fabulous. How about writing? Say again.
I'm sorry. I was just going to say I really love YA, and Queer as a $5 Bill is YA, and also I have a new YA coming out next year, sort of a gay teen James Bond remix kind of thing called A Different Kind of Brave. So I'm really excited about that.
It'll be like what was it, Spy Kids? It'll be the Spy Kids for the
a little older. Spy Kids would probably be the middle grade version.
Okay. How about writing or public speaking? So I think you're a great speaker, by the way. I'm just listening to you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I love speaking. I really do. But if I only could do one, I would probably choose writing, because there's so many stories I want to tell, and I write every day, and I don't speak publicly every day. So I'm going to go with writing.
That's fair. How about for storytelling, books or movies?
I do love movies. So I actually tried to write screenplays for years and never got one produced. And I thought, I should probably change over to books because I have more control. I still don't have a lot of control, but at least a finished book is something. A
Mhm.
finished screenplay is just a blueprint for a house that hasn't been built yet. So I'm going to go with books.
Okay, I'll go with that. How about queer representation in front of the camera or behind the scenes?
In front of the camera.
Okay, that's fair. Activism in person rallies or online campaigns?
If it feels safe, in-person rallies.
Okay. How about preferred settings, real world or fantastic islands?
Real world.
Okay. First person or third person, which one do you like for writing?
Every project's different. These are hard. Um, I think third person.
Okay.
I know first person is super, super popular, but I actually think third person, for me as a writer, works best.
Um, if you're gonna write conflict, you like man versus man or man versus society?
Honestly, I think man versus man is a little more engaging. Man versus society can end up being kind of preachy.
Okay,
Like
I got
if
you.
there isn't, if it's not, if the society isn't somehow embodied in an antagonist, not a mustache twirling villain, but there needs to
Mhm.
be somebody that just railing against the wind. I know you didn't say nature, but like
No, I
I
get it.
think it's a more satisfying story if there's actually somebody, even though in their mind they're not the villain, right? But like
Yeah,
there's somebody in the way of the main character.
nice. Okay. For teaching method, how about through stories or through direct instruction?
Oh, stories.
I love stories. I think stories are like the root of everything, you know.
It's how we learn. It's how our brains are wired.
Absolutely. Storytelling then still traditional or modern?
I guess modern.
Okay, right.
I want to say YA because I find a lot of adult books go on too long with the descriptions, which feels very traditional. So I'm going to go with modern.
So this is the question. We could look at the juxtaposition of, say, Malcolm X and Martin Luther King, but when you're tackling stereotypes, subtlety or directly, subtly or directly.
Oh, direct. I want to be transparent. I want people to see it and be able to hear the actual, like, even when I'm making a point and there's something I discover that sort of might contradict it a little bit, like I'm going
Hmm.
to include that in my books because I want kids to know that people in history were complex and that's okay. And you can be complex and that's okay too.
Awesome. I got two more for you. What's your favorite type of ending? Happy or open-ended?
I do like a happy ending.
Okay, happy endings are all good. And this one, I think I want you to really speak to this one. Empowering youth either through representation or through action.
I think for me, it's empowering youth through representation.
Okay.
It's crafting it's crafting stories, reclaiming our histories. It's inspiring them to know that that the future is infinite. Because if you know that you have a place in the past, you know that you deserve a place at the table today. And if
Awesome.
you know that you have a place at the table today, then the future can be anything, right? Like you're set up well for the future, and that's really what I want to give to young people today.
Excellent. I think your podcast is going to be an amazing hit. I definitely want people to stay in touch with you. They can do that through leewind.org. And you've got your Instagram up here. So we've got Instagram at I am Lee Wind. I'm going to leave the website up here so that people can see it and recognize and be able to get in touch with you. Thank you for this discussion and thank you for your openness and you tell stories so well. You should be a speaker as well as a writer.
Well, thank you. I love sharing about this because it's not about me. It's like I feel like I'm giving all these people from history the opportunity to be heard, and they didn't get a chance to be heard in their lifetime. So it feels like a big honor to get to share.
Thanks for doing it. I appreciate it. Goodbye, everybody. We'll see you in the future.